Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us this afternoon with Pivotal Partners. My name is Hunter Kluss, and I'm a financial advisor with Lateral Advisors, and I'm your moderator for the day. Pivotal Partners is all about understanding the crucial roles for each of our panelists in order to get a successful commercial real estate deal done today. So first, I'd like to introduce Heather Ewing, CEO of Abstract Commercial Real Estate. Heather, take it away.
Thank you for joining us today. So Abstract Commercial Real Estate, we're a boutique commercial real estate firm located in downtown Madison, Wisconsin. And we do represent tenants, landlords, developers with retail, restaurants, and also mixed-use developments. And it's really enriching the lives of the business owners, which then ripples out through the community. And I've been born and raised here in Madison and have lived in the area over 40 years. So it's really a beautiful way to give back in the community. And also, I like to say it as beautifying the area through these different amenities of foods and shopping.
I love that. I love how you tie art into doing business.
Right.
Next, Elise Smith-Back, First Vice President of Business Banking with Park Bank.
Yes, thank you, Hunter. Like she said, my name is Elise Smith-Back with Park Bank, and I help businesses finance buildings. I finance their business, manage their cash flows. We do a lot of rental properties, a lot of apartments, ranging from 2 units all the way up to 300 units. So anything that businesses need money for on the lending side, I can be their partner. I have personally been in banking for over 20 years, and I love helping businesses. Park Bank is a local community bank. We are deeply rooted in the Dane County area. You'll see our name on a lot of projects going on around Dane County. You'll also see us involved with a lot of nonprofits and associations around Dane County. And really, we like to help our businesses get to their next, whatever that may be.
Love it. Thanks, Elise.
Mm-hmm.
Carole Schaeffer, Vice President of Business Development with Freedy & Associates.
Hello, and glad to have everyone join us today. As mentioned, I'm the Vice President of Business Development with Freedy & Associates. We are a 78-year-old general contracting firm based out of Reedsburg, Wisconsin, with an office here in Madison, Wisconsin. If you've ever taken your family to the Wisconsin Dells, you've probably seen our handiwork. We've done a lot of work with Kalahari to the wilderness here in Madison, where our niche is really in the hospitality, restaurant and retail space, although we do have a pretty broad cross section of the type of projects we can do. And yeah, that's me. So glad to be here today.
Thanks, Carole. Excited to hear from you today as well. Second to last, we have James Van Buskirk, Account Executive with M3 Insurance. James, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Hunter. James Van Buskirk, M3 Insurance here in Madison. Our home office here. We help to insure owners, tenants, builders, contractors, everyone basically involved in the process. So I work pretty closely with our construction real estate team dedicated to all of the crafts within construction and real estate risks. We'll write nationally, internationally, local, anywhere across the board.
Love it. Everyone does need insurance, so you are a special one, James. And last but not least, Daniele St. Marie Thompson, founding partner of St. Marie Law.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me today. And I am an attorney, and I've been practicing law for over 20 years, primarily in the commercial real estate arena. I do quite a bit of work with Heather and work with both landlords and tenants on their leases. I've also been involved in various development projects and working with companies building headquarters and developing various parcels. I also work with clients that are involved with mergers and acquisitions, whether it's with or without real estate. So businesses that want to buy and sell in the area or buy a building and start a business. I'll work with a lot of clients in that area. And my practice involves clients pretty much all throughout the state of Wisconsin, but like I said, primarily focusing in Dane County.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for having me here today. This is my first time moderating Pivotal Partners, and I'm very excited. because today
having
we are discussing triple net leasing. So a few items we're going to be talking about is tenant, landlord, and developer advantage points in triple net leasing, timing, and when you'd bring in each of our panelists in a triple net lease deal, situations to avoid, and then key elements you might want to look out for. So our first question for today is Pivotal Partners is, what is your role in triple net leasing and how do you work with each other? So Heather, let's start out with you since you are the first point of contact in a triple net lease deal.
Definitely. So the nice thing is with triple net leasing, it's definitely catching on in a lot of different markets. And the nice thing about that is from the landlord vantage point, it really does take care of the majority of the expenses for them in leasing the property. So you can really get a great return on your property. And so when I start out, obviously you've done some great prospecting, maybe canvassing, things of that nature to drum up the different prospects. And then it's really understanding where that prospect is at, where they're at financially, what their timeline is. Is it a retail use? Is it restaurant? You know, if it's office, if it's a different asset category, I happily refer that out. So in the triple net leasing, it's really important to identify your lane and also stay in your lane. So something that has been painful over the years, and I encounter it probably once or twice a year, is you may have heard of the term res-mercial. It's the residential person that wants to be in commercial, but they're not. And what I like to do in those situations is offer a referral. If not, they're really not servicing their client. And there's been some horror stories, which I won't bother you guys with in this edition of our Pivotal Partners. But it's really understanding them, what money they have available for a build out, and also helping them understand what they might need for a build out, just very loose and dirty, because obviously Carole is the expert in that arena. But I will encounter sometimes if someone's new, they'll have 50,000 saved, which they feel is a significant amount. And as Carole will go into detail, that's gone in a hot second. So it's really helping guide them through the process if they are new. If they're an established group, it's helping them identify the market that it is correct for them, the demographics, the psychographics. If that's a new term for you, that is how people spend their money, how frequently they eat out, where they shop, all those different factors, it is tracked. And that actually would be another great quarterly topic. But it's really aligning the right prospect to the right property.
So how do you find out someone's psychographics? What questions do you ask them? What should someone expect if they want to work with you throughout a deal?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Specifically, because some people don't know themselves and how they spend their money.
And so this is also where it's typically an investment. So there's different software. It's quite costly, such as Placer AI. And what's nice is I am a CCIM. So we have, it's called Site to Do Business. And I can identify by market. I can compare properties on one block of the Capitol Square to another block, any arena. You plug and chug. So you enter the data, what you're looking for, identify the type of asset, the addresses, and it's going to print out pages of information. So then it's really up to me to make that relatable and understandable for the prospect. And again, if it's someone brand new, that's a very different conversation than one of the nationals that I might be working with. So it's knowing your audience, right? What do they need and how can you adjust both your communication skills, but also the information to best help them.
Yeah. Thanks for answering that.
You bet.
So you help them find a property. They're ready to get going on it. They have the finances. Next, they would go to a lease. Can you share your role within triple net leasing?
Yes. So I hopefully will be providing the financing for them to do any kind of build out that they're going to need to do for the lease. Very rarely, I think, do you find a landlord willing to put in all of the tenant improvements. So typically the person who's going to be leasing the space needs to have the funds to be able to put into the space. So what I like to do is I like to work alongside people like Heather and people like Carole more in the front end, because that is going to get a better idea of how much they need and if that's feasible for that business. So on a new business, when you're not making money, when you haven't proven yourself, the most important thing for them is to have a business plan to show us how they're going to make the money to pay the loan back that they're hopefully trying to get. For new businesses, there's a lot of great programs out there, and the best being an SBA 7A program, which allows them to have a lease a loan for up to 10 years that they can pay back. And it's backed by, or it's guaranteed 75% by the government. So it makes it easier for banks to want to lend to people that way when they have a 75% guarantee from the government. So it's important to get some sort of budget from people like Carole and Freedy to say, okay, it's going to cost $350,000. The landlord is going to put 150 in, and that's how we're going to get to our $500 build out. And then again, going through and showing how that loan is going to be repaid. If it's an existing business, it's a little easier because the business has already hopefully proven themselves that they can either cash flow it now, or they'll have a pro forma showing me that, hey, because we're going to be moving into this bigger space, we're going to have more availability, we're going to have a bigger space to operate, we're going to make X more money to cover this new lease. So yeah, it's very important that they're working with a broker like Heather to negotiate a fair lease. It's also important for them to be working with a good general contractor to give them good, reliable numbers, so they're not surprised with change orders along the way and maybe costing them more money. And then Danielle, it's especially important to have an attorney review that to make sure it's in their best interest. And then after all of that's done, before we close the loan and before they take occupancy, we need to have insurance. So should something happen, we need James to insure that business, and that is required obviously for any kind of lending that we do. So
we need all the pivotal partners to make this happen. That's why we're here today, to let everyone know where and when you come in.
Yeah. So that's like how I operate.
Thanks for sharing that, Carole. So Elise mentioned how she works a lot with you. Tell me about your role in this process.
We help the client determine if the budget that they have to work with is going to be realistic for what they want in the existing space. And I mean, a build out can cost $50 a square foot, or it can cost $400 a square foot. It depends. You're putting in, what kind of a business you're running, what sort of materials you're using, are you building out a white box space, which is in a newer building, or are we going into an older building that might have surprises as we start to do renovations? So talking to your contractor early and often is going to help you get a better sense of what you might be looking at, because we'll come in with our subcontractors and look at your HVAC and look at your electrical and look at your plumbing and figure out, what you can do in that space, because not every space is going to be the right fit for, like I said, we work in restaurant, we do a lot of breweries and retail, and what you're going to do for a salon versus what you're going to do for a brewing company versus what you're going to do for, a retail store or a vet clinic, or we do across the board, are going to be very different needs. And so, we'll have, it's kind of funny on one end, we'll get somebody who basically gives you the back of a napkin and be like, how much is this going to cost per square foot? And well, I can't exactly tell you right off the bat. If we start looking at it, we can get into the space and talk with you. And then also having a realistic expectation of your budget. If you come in and say, I have $400,000 for a build out, but you have to do major HVAC or major, things that are going to themselves cost $300,000, and then you've only got a small amount left to actually put in your gingerbread or to put in the equipment that you need, that's where you can run into problems. So we, work closely then with the financial institutions like Elise and with Heather right out of the gate saying, hey, this is what it's going to take in this space. And, they are very seasoned professionals. And so kind of we'll have a sense of that out of the gates, but we can help really put more firm numbers to that, so that when that loan are trying to make it a go, that it's all of the ducks are in a row. So we don't, like you said, we don't get surprises. halfway through. So
So how long should someone expect to work with you? Is this on the front end? Is it throughout the whole process?
you would work with us throughout the whole process, but on the front end, getting that initial conceptual budget of kind of like, hey, we've got a sense of what we want to do. Here's some floor plans. Here's some, levels of, because obviously the types of finishes that you're going to put in there, the type of equipment, we're working on a project right now where we have to coordinate with the kitchen designers. And so, they work with us on the front end, and then throughout the process as they're like drilling it down to the actual construction drawings and more specific budgets, but getting that conceptual in the beginning so that they can kind of get a sense of that they're going to be able to get the kind of financing they need to make it go and pencil out.
I'm
jumping in on that real quick is that, from the leasing perspective, the LOI, the letter of intent, I always like to start working with Carole, a contractor, early on. And the reason for that is unless they have significant wealth, which certain clients do, where it's not going to matter. They can kind of write any check. That it really does help in the negotiation process, because you can't go back and just say, oops, we just got the construction budget and now we need an additional 25 per square foot. It's not going to go that way. So that's where sometimes people want to rush through and just make it happen, but it's really in the best manner to take that time up front to get, you do start with a rough estimate to prove out, are they going to be able to work with a lease, or is this something they need to wait another year or two and, buffer their reserves? But if the timing does align, then it works right in tandem with the LOI through the lease, final budgets from Carole and things like that. So it's a really integral part of the leasing process.
I don't want to get too ahead of ourselves here, but just to piggyback off of what you were saying, Carole, are you in the lease, this might pertain to you too, are you seeing build outs slow down with where prices are at and with everything that has happened the past few years? No. Increasing.
No. Still seeing a lot of,
has it stayed consistent? Are you seeing any changes at all?
I would say there's some project, it's really kind of an interesting whack-a-mole, because on one hand, projects that, you thought sure we're going to go through don't necessarily happen, but then for some reason, all of a sudden you have these other things that are coming in. It feels like, at least for us, we've continued to have a very steady stream of build outs and renovations and upgrades. And we've just been staying consistently busy. It's just maybe some of the types of projects or it's not the ones you necessarily expected 6 months ago, but something else comes up. So I don't know about you, Elise, but we've stayed at least in that space, pretty busy.
That's interesting. I find that a little surprising, not too surprising, but I'll be interested to see how things go over the next year. Back to roles. James, can you tell us the role of insurance in triple net leasing?
Sure.
Both for tenants and landlords.
I was going to say we have to pick a side to start with. I'd say with owners or landlords, one thing that, like you were just talking about with the cost of construction or cost of materials, the valuation, the building valuations, and how those are covered or distributed among the tenant or tenants. That is something that we pay pretty close attention to, tracking and monitoring building values and making sure that the underlying policies are covering what they should be covering. Same for the tenant side, making sure that, those appropriate. I think one thing that insurance companies have done recently is that they're really trying to play catch up from whether it's increased inputs or inflation on top. And then a $10 million building is now $13 million. They've got a 6% built in, but that's not going to catch up quick enough. And so they get as interesting as they can with, I won't get into the whole legal stuff behind it and rate filings, but insurance companies there's a lot of buildings out there that are underinsured right now. And yeah, that does ultimately increasing the coverage on the building does increase the premium. And so everybody's going to be affected accordingly, but the premium increase is minimal next to a coinsurance penalty or anything else that might be incurred if there is a loss. So it's something to definitely, I think building values particularly are interesting this year again. But we also come in with, satisfying any kind of contractual obligation that you have, whether it's for lending. We've got to figure out how to satisfy what the bank wants to see. We've also got, indemnification and pieces like this that are not just the insurance section, right? That says that we want 1 million of liability, which is good, but it's. We like I love being involved in the process. I think we generally do come in closer to the end of the, unless there's like a builder's risk involved. In that case, then we're in it from the beginning. But my ask would be involve your insurance people before you sign the contract. Before it's all done. 90% of the time it's after the fact, and that's okay. That's just what we do. But it's really interesting. I like this topic. I think it's fascinating just from where I sit and what we see day to day.
Well, then this is a good reminder for anyone listening. Check your insurance policies, especially nowadays. So
yeah, check the building coverage, and like even if you know somebody that can get this building rebuilt at $215 a square foot. That ain't going to be enough.
I love it. So last but not least, again, Danielle, please share with us your role in triple net leasing.
Sounds good. I think one of my primary roles in the process is to be a good listener from the start of meeting and talking with a client, because ideally they've all been in contact. A good client would be one that's already been working with their broker, like Heather may have their letter of intent finalized. They have been working with their lender. They have also been touching base with maybe just a few contractors that they're narrowing it down, or already have started maybe some potential plans and basic plans and specs. And insurance, I didn't forget about you, James, but it does come in because I do think what you said earlier is important. I'm going to come back to that. But so I think everybody has a key role in my job, because I rely on a lot of what they've been doing on back end, and then try to bring it together in the language. And it's all very important. So some of the things that can be challenging is, we go from the letter of intent and all of this excitement to a 30 to 60 page lease. And sometimes that can be a little daunting for people because it's a lot, and it's taking what they thought was already agreed to on, their letter of intent, and now pulling it all into a significant document. So the goal is to try to limit clients from being overwhelmed, and then really helping them understand primarily a lot of the things related to cost. What is their rent? Has that already been taken care of? And when we're looking at the triple net portion, a lot of people need to understand what's all involved in that. That's everything. The landlord is going to come back and charge you for absolutely everything insurance related, every type of tax you can even imagine under the sun is in there, all assessments. And then looking at maintenance. Some of the key things that I think are really important from my end that I usually tend to ask people is, if they're coming into an existing building, how old is it? Is there a capital improvement plan? Do they have a budget for capital? Are they doing some savings plans? Are there any known major improvements coming up that they should be asking about? Have they seen a budget over the last year or two to see about where the average costs are for the extra additional rent on top of their regular rent, to really make sure that they're clear on what their costs are? So we'll walk through that. And then one of the key things that I do is I will highlight the insurance section and ask them to send that document to their agent before signing it. And even if we comment back to a landlord, from a tenant side, I will indicate in there, this is under review by insurance or things like that, because I do think it's really important that everybody has their role and part laid out within the document. From a landlord's perspective, obviously, you know, they have a lot of provisions that are very protective of themselves, and you know, they add in a lot of things in their operating cost definitions that protect them if they grow, they hire, they add benefits, they do these different things. And so a landlord tends to be they overdo it a little bit, and they're very leery to enter into a cap on those costs because it's very uncertain to know how it's going to change each year. I usually, from the tenant side, try to request some sort of cap or percent increase each year. And on the landlord side, it's pretty much you go on the flip side to try to just, you know, lay it all out there and let it be a tenant responsibility and take ownership for those costs. So it kind of depends on where we're coming from. But that would be just a general overview of my role related to the triple net part.
So with vacancy rates being much higher than they were pre-COVID, how do you see triple net lease agreements changing? Do you see them being more lenient, maybe taking on as a landlord some of the expenses? Do you see them increasing them because vacancy rates are higher when they come in? Do you see any of that changing?
I'll jump in on this one. So for the Madison market, I do a lot of work in the downtown, but also Dane County in general. And, you know, there were some modifications to the triple net leases during COVID, right? And that's where if you want to say the kick out clause was in. But as far as rents, I mean, rents did not really falter, at least on the properties that I represented. And the thing for that is when you're a very avid prospector and you're making the calls, you're canvassing, calling regionally, calling other states, you know, kind of really shopping on a grand scale is what I call it, is that you do pull in the people that have the resources, the ability, and the desire to move forward on a lease. And I would say, I mean, even last year, there were no kickouts. And so, you know, this is the interesting thing too in the marketplace is that some people that are here are also coming to the market will expect that the landlord is going to roll out the red carpet and provide a free build out. And it's just not going to happen in our market. It's doing well considering, and again, it takes more, I would say, on the broker to find the right people, but ever since COVID, it's been busy, but what happened is it wiped out the middle. You either have money or you don't. Mm-hmm. And so there are a lot of people that are gaining market share because they are expanding. They're really utilizing this time and pushing the financials and have the good relationships with lenders typically or investors. And I would say the rates, they're very good.
I would just pop in on that too and say the one thing that I've noticed is if anything, the change is that there were some downsizing. So it wasn't so much that they weren't going to pay rent, it was making adjustments to their practices and policies as a company. And if their lease was running out, some people went in half and did half the space, but I really didn't notice any other changes. Like Heather said, those provisions have pretty much gone away pretty quickly that related to that, but I've just noticed some particular downsizing.
And we were really blanketed in Madison, which is why it's such a hot market. I mean, I was out on a run the other night and there was 3 cranes, you know, on 3 different blocks as I'm standing at the corner of Regent and West Wash, which is great. And so due to our university, due to our state government, that's why people continually invest, not only developers here in Madison, Dane County, but I'm working with developers out of Chicago, New York, California. The market nationally is very small and it only gets smaller here. So when it's a good market, people want to invest.
When do you see opportunity for the middle? You say they either have money, do it, or they don't. When do you see there is going to be opportunity for the middle to get back in?
Personally, I would say it's resourcefulness, right? Through COVID and everything forward. I started my business during it, which people are like, oh my. I personally saw the opportunity in it. It was a complete leveling, if you want to say. And from my vantage point, I saw it as an opportunity because I'm like, great, I can start it, get it going. And by the time the doors opened, I'll be at max race pace. And so I think a lot of it is the people in the middle that have done very well are creative, they're resourceful, and they very much have a positive attitude of what would it take to get this? What do I need to do? Who can I talk to? What can I create? You know, all these different methods versus hitting the wall and then they're out.
Yep.
So it's a mindset. It's a mindset thing, which I do see as, you know, the game each person plays within their mind, their business. But I always say commercial real estate is a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's not a medium-sized distance. It's not for everyone. And that's okay, because God knows you wouldn't want me as your nurse or something, right? So it's just aligning in the right realm for your personality and where your skill set lies.
That Heather, you do know a lot about health and taking care of your body, so I don't think you'd be a bad nurse. I think you can do anything.
God bless you.
So what are, in each of your perspectives, benefits, so pros and cons of being a tenant in this type of deal versus a landlord? We've talked a little bit about the differences in your little role, but as a tenant, what is advantages and disadvantages to it?
Well, I think as a tenant, you have less risk because you don't, let's say you're in a strip center of there's 4 tenants, you don't have the responsibility of the building as a whole. You don't have the responsibility of filling in other spaces. You simply can pay your rent and run your business and kind of wash your hands of it at the end of the day. I also think it's a really good trial period for businesses that are new. That I have a lot of people coming to me like, I want to start a business and I want to build my own building. I want to buy my own building. And sometimes leasing first to prove yourself as a business is a really, really good option. So it can kind of get you're walking before you're running, basically. So personally, in my experience, I've helped a lot of small businesses go from leasing to building ownership. And I just think that transition is very seamless and can be less daunting to someone starting a business. So that's my perspective from a tenant.
I would piggyback on that. Someone come in who was like, I want to buy a building and I'm going to occupy this part of the building and then I'm going to rent out this part of the building. And we're like, okay, but here's the thing, because of access issues and the way you're going to lay that out, now you have to put ADA compliant bathrooms here and access here, and that's going to cost blip, 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 and all of a sudden that just ratchets up really quickly. So I think, and especially with Danielle mentioned the downsizing that's kind of happening, or resizing and that sort of thing. As a tenant, you have a little bit more flexibility. If you've got a landlord, you've got what you've got. Right now you own your buildings, but if you're a tenant, you've got more options for where you can locate if you work with your broker to find the right one. So that's kind of the advantage of the tenant side of it. But depending on where you're at as a landlord, obviously there can be advantages of ownership if you're a savvy landlord. So we deal with the thing where when we do, if we're pricing out a build out, we're not the ones that are figuring out who's paying for what. We're saying, okay, if you want to put this in this space, this is what it's going to cost you for your MEPs, for your build out, for your so on and so forth. And then it's kind of between the landlord and the tenant to work with their broker to figure out what's going to stay there, what's, the TI that's going to be provided by the landlord, and what's the, tenant going to have to come up with. So it's an interesting, when we're doing our stuff, we're like, okay, here's what that space is going to cost you to do the things that you want to do.
I would say, just jumping on too, I mean, they're 2 different skill sets, and depending again where you align and also what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy. I mean, if you're the owner of a strip center and you own or occupy one of the spaces and you have to lease out 2 or 3 others, you may not want to do that. And who's going to focus on your business if you don't have a good GM or an operator, right? And I think also with the challenge of people having the right people in the right positions, that finding that is really challenging in the market. And I think too, I think there's so much allure of commercial real estate in general right now, and people do in their imagination have the, it's mailbox money. You buy a building and suddenly you just have millions coming in and you're on an island and you're vacationing and there's no concerns. But, in working with a lot of landlords and developers, there is a lot of humps and bumps to get through. Also, if you do have a small property, if you have only 2 tenants, one goes out and they're the major leaseholder, you're scrambling. So kind of like anything else in life, it's all risk and return, and people have very different comfort levels for risk.
I think that's a really good point. Just looking at the scale of the type of landlord that you are and your investment opportunities. And if you're new, I think that's where there's just so much more risk because you make more mistakes. Then you get into the seasoned landlords of having an investment team and, an oversight group, some great management, that they just really differ in terms of what their capabilities are. And I think as a tenant, it's important you should do a little bit of due diligence on your landlord for that very reason. Is if they know what they're doing, they're going to take care of you. If they're new and not sure, you run the risk that things are going to be a little more tough. So I guess that I would just make sure that it's from a tenant's perspective is do your research.
What kind of research should they be doing? Is there anyone on this team that they could reach out to if they are new to doing this?
I mean, I think I can speak for all of us that we all help people that are brand new, and we also help people that have millions of, dollars invested. And so the nice thing is, even if we're not a fit for them, we always like to provide the next step. So then that way they're not stuck and struggling. So giving them a next step, a resource that they can reach out to, a person, things of that nature. And I think that's where it was kind of interesting too, is people really need to understand, especially with brokerage, that go for the broker that understands and works in the asset class. When you have someone that does everything, that's great. But if you think about it, their information is diluted due to the volume of deals that they're doing. And it's painful, and a pet peeve of mine when people are trying to break into a different lane and they don't know it. And the reason I think it bothers me so is that they're harming the tenant, their client, and that's not acceptable in my book. So refer out if it's not your asset class, and we always help them with that next step.
Yeah,
I think that probably goes for all of us, though. I mean, I know for us, don't come to me if you're building a 15-story structural steel building. We're the big numbers. That's not what we do. We'd be doing you a disservice to say that we could. So I think it's important to know the expertise. I mean, if you are doing a retail or a ground up 1 to 5-story building, we love to talk to you. But if you're starting, there's things we're not going to be looking at because we want to hone in on what it is that we do extremely well. And I think that each one of us has that. We're not going to try and outkick our coverage. We're going to
integrity
do well repeatedly, as opposed to, because we want the best experience for our clients.
Yeah, that's a really good transition into who is an ideal fit for you, and how do you vet who you work with. Heather, I know you've mentioned a little bit, but Elise, James, or Danielle, do any of you want to expand on that?
We'll work with, I personally will work with I work with a lot of early stage companies up through, I'd say revenue is about 35, 40 million. And then above that, the 15-story steel frame, that is going to go to our construction and real estate team. Those folks, that is what they do all day, every day. And I personally, for 15 years, have worked with the smaller stuff, if you will. Yeah, we've got, so that's sort of where I fit in the puzzle. Still not going to try and take on the 15-story building. We've got resources for that, the appropriate resources for it. And, we all work together really well as far as, who's going to do what. Is this a better fit there? I've had some of my clients grow and go from, 3 or 4 buildings that they own to, through M&A or however, just grow to where they need resources that are greater than what I personally can provide, but our construction real estate team can certainly take care of.
Yep. Elise, you mentioned you work with all different types of people, just first time, very experienced. Is there a type of client that fits best with you and you have the most experience with over your past 20 years of business banking?
There's not one individual industry, I guess, that stands out. I've done a lot on the commercial real estate side, representing landlords that are building buildings and stuff like that. But what's a really good fit for me and Park Bank are businesses in the Dane County area. And I would say smaller family run or just small business in general is who I like to target. I like to, there's something extra good feeling about helping a sole proprietor or a woman-owned business. So I would say if anybody in the Dane County area, existing business, like I said, I do some startup, but majority of what I focus on is existing business, anywhere from revenues from 1 to 5 million. I mean, I've got clients up to 100+ million, but yeah, that small business niche.
Yeah, I love that. Danielle, anything you want to add on that topic? Otherwise, I'm going to pivot it over.
No, I would, well, okay. One thing I would just say, I do rely a lot on the brokers initially, really in looking at the type of client. But one of the other things that I think is really important too is looking at your schedule and looking at your availability, because when you're doing these, is from my perspective, I'm usually in when this is done, they start and they can commence construction, or they can get in the space and really get going. And I think it's important too on my end that I make sure that my time is available to get it turned around, or I'm open, that I am very open with when that can happen, because I think being sometimes at the end of the process, there's a lot of people that get, frustrated on terms or language and things like that. And you really want to keep people on track. So, and make sure from my end that I try to keep things on track so that they can proceed. So.
And one thing I would like to throw in, we work with a lot of small businesses and sole proprietors who maybe they're really, really good at making a widget or, caring for animals, but they don't have that expertise in getting something through the process, or, what is it all going to take and how do we plan that schedule? I met someone recently who had no idea how to even start that conditional use process, or how do we get the approval to do this ground up building. So that's where we have kind of we work a lot with those smaller businesses and family-owned businesses, where we can help them go from it's a twinkle in your eye and we're working you to, hey, we can get you through that approval process, because that's also something that everyone here knows. If you don't get sign off from the municipality that you're working in, you don't have a project. So we do a lot of work on the front end with the approvals and the conditional use and the land use decision-making bodies to get those entitlements. So just want to throw that in there.
Thanks for throwing that in there. I want to pivot this. We're about 20 minutes left. What are situations to avoid when it comes to triple net leasing, or what is something to be on the lookout for in each of your industries? Heather, if you want to start.
Sure, definitely. I think at the end of the day, each lease is unique. I think sometimes people think that what they're signing is a standard form, and it's really not. So again, that kind of circles back to getting the right team together. Brokerage through the review that Danielle does. And I would say too, it's making sure that you're comfortable with the numbers, because it's your commitment, you're personally guaranteeing it. And that's something I've always brought up front, because some people are surprised by that and some will adamantly say no. And the way I see it is, if you're not betting on yourself, why should a stranger bet on you and your business?
Yeah.
But I would say, again, referring back to getting the broker in the asset class, because that's where people are just missing out on so much money. And right now there's a deal and I can tell the broker has no idea about retail. There are so many segments missing, and it's sloppy, and it's unfortunate for his client, and they're out of state. And so I'm going to have to create a lot to just help bring it together. But I would say really spend the time up front, interview brokers. I'm happy to give some tips if people are looking, if they have questions. and ask for proven experience. Talk is cheap. Ask for the deals they've done, and they need to be deals that are comparable to what you are looking to do. If you're not a 25,000 unit franchise, don't try to replicate that when you're a one up or have 5. So go to the broker that has deal experience in what you want to do.
Yeah, I would piggyback off that and just say, just don't don't skip steps, and work with true professionals, because in the long run, it will pay off. I know a lot of people want to save money, and not necessarily mean to cut corners, but they may be cutting corners to do that, and overlooking some small things can really add up at the end. So just working with an experienced broker, working with an experienced general contractor, working with a bank that has your back, insurance, attorney, etc. Yeah, just don't skip steps.
It all affects your bottom line and your longevity.
I can imagine something would go wrong if you're skipping steps, especially in something this big.
I always say anyone can do a deal, but it's how much profit are you going to lose? Because, you do encounter people like that. And there's a reason why all of us have been in our professions for many years and many hours, 24/7. So there's reasoning behind it.
Danielle, from your perspective, what are things that tenants and landlords should look out for when working with an attorney?
I would just reiterate a couple of things that I said earlier, just really looking into the properties and from a tenant's perspective and really understanding what you're getting into. One example with working with Heather is that, it not only could be working with a landlord, but that landlord could have the property part of a condo. So the landlord has less negotiating power than maybe you thought, because they're bound by an overarching group of condo docs. So when you come in and you want to start making changes, a lot of things aren't very flexible. So it's just a learning curve for everybody when you're going in to understand how things are structured, how landlords have buildings, how they have their ownership. It impacts insurance, it impacts costs overall. So I think, I do feel like I keep saying do your research, but it really is just understanding the backstory of where you're going, why you're going there. Location is so important, who's around you, and also looking at, can you handle the financial burden if it goes up 5%, if it goes, again, the tenant takes on that risk of those costs. And to landlords, what are some opportunities that maybe you could look to help your tenants? Are there any grant funds, or is there TIF? Is there something that's available to help your tenants out? But I think that from both sides, there's just some things to understand about the project in general to know how those costs can fluctuate over time.
I would say if you've got a budget of say, $2 million, don't go out, meet with your architect and design a $3 million building without talking to your contractor, because there's nothing worse than someone getting this beautiful build out or beautiful building designed and then going, okay, we want to do this and here's our budget. And we'll be like, that's really expensive gingerbread. So, and then you have to strip some of those things down and value engineer them. So if you can getting people talking together early and often is really critical in terms of being able to get what it is that you need within the budget because we all have been dealing with, increasing the costs of materials and supply chain and what you can get. And, there might be a difference in a white window versus an almond window. Is $300 per window difference? Is it really that important? But having those conversations right away. So that's what I would say is don't go out and design something that you're not going to be able to actually build if you're not having those conversations right away. So that's my piece of my nugget for the day.
Good tip. I hope everyone follows it. As an advisor, you should never be living outside of your means. James, from your perspective, obviously make sure you have the coverage that you need. Is there anything else from your perspective people should look out for?
Yeah, I think the building valuation is probably the biggest right now it's kind of across the board. New construction aside, I'd say that I think that the insurance valuation might be very different than what you think it's going to be. Not very different, but is usually going to be slightly higher. So just keep that in mind. I mean, this is the insurance companies, they have all kinds of tools and algorithms that they use. This is not just somebody picking a number off of a board saying, frame construction, 2 stories, apartment, whatever it is. We're going to be about 255, right? It's pretty calculated. So, but oftentimes that number is different than what people think they can rebuild it for. And I would say if you're not sure about the coverage that you have, you should just ask questions and talk to your insurance person about it and say, like, my favorite thing to ask is why, and not too many times, but why does this look like that? So especially from the tenant perspective in this case, finding out what coverage, where should my building coverage be to make sure that I'm, in line with where I'm supposed to be here. From the landlord perspective, there's a lot of additional coverages available out there. There's that will help you get tenants put back in the building, for example. Like there's like a $25,000, $50,000 allocation that some carriers will give you to, if your tenant closes shop and disappears in the middle of the night, there's some coverage that could be available for helping to get a new tenant in. Or in the cause of, in the event of a loss, if everyone has to go somewhere and the building's getting fixed, there's coverage available to help get everyone back into their spaces. So, I think asking questions and working with people that, just like everybody has said, I mean, people that are familiar with what you're doing, not, be familiar with what you're doing. If you're just getting into the 25,000 unit range, I guess you got to start somewhere at some point, but, maybe, you seek the advice, like you're saying, like we're all professionals and we've got to have licenses to do most everything that all of us do. And there's a reason for that, right? This is not just, there's a lot of information available out there. You can do a lot of research on your own. But at the end of the day, you've got to have, there's a reason you got to be licensed to do most everything that we do here.
Do you see that a lot of your client base takes advantage of those additional coverage options?
A lot of the times they don't know to ask for them. So we'll present them. I mean, this is just for me and my team. We will usually add additional coverages in and they just kind of appear as line items and we'll make little talking points to them. But it's not, a lot of those are not things that people would generally know to ask about or to bring up, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of those additional coverage options. So I think that that's very valuable. And now the people who are listening, hopefully they know and can share that information with who they work with. So with that being said, we have 7 minutes left. Is there anything else any of you want to add in regards to triple net leasing that we have not discussed today?
I would say just kind of jumping on to what James just said, it's like the statement of you don't know what you don't know. And that's why, to his point of by creating your pivotal partners, you're able to go to those people and they're able to share that information, because otherwise there's no way you would know that. And I think too of, you also have kind of the analysis paralysis where then people want to like dive deep into every different category, but it's really identifying the right resource within each of the categories that will be able to best suit you, which I think is important. But I would say from there, really going back to the negotiations of the triple net leases, it can really span, some deals have been done very quickly, a couple of months, others to over a year, so it really does vary. And it depends on the state of the current property. Are they adding a new development on top of the property? All these different factors, which affects the timing. So having clear time expectations up front, and that's where sometimes maybe a property that you do like just isn't the right fit if timing is more important than a particular location. So I think it's really understanding your needs and basing every decision off of that need.
And as far as having expectations in regards to the timing of everything, Heather, are you the one to help guide them through what that timeline is going to look like? Or is someone else in our pivotal partners part of that?
Yeah, so from my end, it's really understanding what they desire and then sharing different properties, you know, within this time frame. This is something where we could go. If you're willing to take more time, this is going to require a greater build out and this and that. And then it's always working with Carole, a contractor that can then assign the true lead time. So, you know, I can get them to a certain point, but then she's going to have to provide that market lead time materials that I just don't have. So that's why a deal really can't be done without everyone, or I guess any deal can be done, but good luck on the back end of that.
So Heather, and maybe this is, I kind of flipping the script, I'm going back to this, but I'm sure most of the people that are listening today are fairly sophisticated and understand triple net lease. But for those who might want you to back up what they're Googling, if you could do the elevator pitch on what a triple net lease entails, because we haven't exactly broken that down. We just kind of talked about our roles in it. So maybe just hearing as our closing remarks from you, what that entails.
That is a great point, Carole. So a triple net lease, the triple net is 3 different pillars is what I like to say. 1 is the real estate taxes. 2 is the CAM, the common area maintenance, which I say goes into beautifying the aesthetics, snow removal, lawn care, things like that. And then property insurance. So the tenant does pay a proportionate share of all of those 3 in addition to their base rent. So when there is a new tenant new to the realm of leasing, they'll look at the base rent and think that that's the rent. And what I always say is, as a rough number, as a rule of thumb, the triple net's going to be about 1/3 of the base rent that you then add on. So it's really important that people understand that and have it clarified from the beginning, because those are 2 different numbers, especially when you have a $35 triple net and you add on $8. You know, some people are going to want to pay it and others aren't. So again, it's one of those 2 of understanding the revenue opportunity of a property versus the expenses. The expenses are always pretty fast and easy. And the revenue side of kind of that vision is where you're really getting the traction of it. But again, it goes back to risk, where you're at financially, resources available currently and forward. So I always tell people, you know, work with a lease, work with the lender, so that have a line of credit. You don't have to use it, but every business at some point is going to have an unexpected expense. And a really important point of triple net leasing on the tenant side is they are caring for maintenance, repair, and replacement of the HVAC. And again, if it's new, that throws people. There are modifications, that all goes to negotiation, but that's where I work with a few different tenants. And the nice thing is, since I do so much landlord work, I really am able to get into the nitty gritty for them for that. But it's amazing how many dollars are left on the table that the tenant rep just isn't going for. But when I'm representing the landlord, I'm definitely not saying anything. So I'm true to my clients. So
yeah. Love to hear that, as we all should be true to our clients.
Exactly.
So, well, thanks for taking the time, everyone, for spending this past hour with us. Again, Pivotal Partners, we are speaking on triple net leasing today. Look forward to July 25th. Pivotal Partners will be meeting on hotel development. From there, the next event will be October 17th, and stay tuned for our next surprise subject. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks,
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Hunter.
Have a
Bye,
great
guys.
day.